in my vision of change, third parties in America, it's hard for us to win. But we need to focus on taking care of our material needs while building up a anti-war movement, an anti-capitalist movement, a proletariat movement. So we need to focus on mutual aid. That is what Rome is doing with Tour for the Poor. That is what we're doing, launching RBN chapters all over this country, so we can separate ourselves from the capitalist system. Once we separate ourselves from the capitalist system by building mutual aid societies, we show up and build those mutual aid societies via third party. So when we do our food drives, whenever we show up and help people, we are letting people know that we showed up. You have a mutual aid party that show up, that are taking care of the people while the politicians is abandoning us. We build this movement, we get on the debate stage. All we need is 5%. A lot of people don't know that 5% in the third party gets you federal funding. 15% puts you on a national debate stage. Now, remember, 3% is all you really need historically to have massive social change. And then a lot of people, like, if you shut stuff down via general strike, there are a lot of people who are like, oh, just give them what they want, right? So you just need to build that momentum. If we had a third party to get 5% federal funding, running on popular ideas, economic populism while ending the war, that coalition is already here. We just need to put it together. Then if we get to 15%, we're talking about a real game changer where we had a third party candidate. What I would like to see a populist, anti-war third party candidate calling out neocons on both sides. And if you got 15% of the population, enough to get you on the debate stage, you're talking about serious coalition building power that the establishment have to acknowledge. And if they don't acknowledge and they continue to fight us and be anti-democratic, then we talk about general strikes. Then we talk about shutting society down. This is when we get into the topic that the boutique managerial class, a lot of people who are comfortable, they don't want to have the discussion because they don't want society shut down. But that is what we must do. And with the population and with the populace on our side, this is how you enact change. Now, George, everything I just described to you, this is a long process. Like, it's not easy. It takes a lot of revolutionary discipline, but that's why we need to get started right now. Right now. The organization of Islamic cooperation is now formally endorsing South Africa's charges of genocide against the state of Israel. This is gigantic because the OIC is the second largest intergovernmental organization next to the UN. The OIC has 57 member states, and they put out a statement that says that there must be urgent action taken to end the genocide of the Palestinians by Israel. We have all of these states that are coming out against Israel and endorsing the genocide charges against them. And we are still a week away from the hearing. Ooh, just to wait until South Africa starts reading all those receipts that they gather next week. So Israel, seeing international support against them grow, surely they have a great strategy to counter South Africa's very well detailed and legitimate claims of genocide against the state of Israel, right? Right.
Condemns South Africa's decision to play advocate for the devil.
And they're saying South Africa is complicit with Hamas. Good luck with that argument in court. The average Zionist argues like a fucking toddler, man. If I was Israeli, I'd be like, if you don't like the Kansas City Chiefs, you are Hamas. If you eat pineapples on pizza, you are Hamas. If you wear socks with sandals, you are definitely Hamas. Okay. So we can all acknowledge that calling everyone Hamas is not a good legal strategy, but surely Israel hired top legal talent, right? Someone of great moral standing that will make Israel look good on the international stage, right? Wrong. Israel just elected Alan Dershowitz, notorious pedophile rapist lawyer who was just implicated in the Epstein documents, which is not surprising because Jeffrey Epstein worked with the Mossad in order to blackmail politicians on behalf of Israel. But you guys are not ready for that conversation. I have fun with those. Big shout out to Hotspot. What's poppin'? My friends, my family? We are back. My first stream of this crazy year that is to come. The first stream of 2024. And I had to bring back with much demand, Nick at Night. This is Nick at Night season 2. You know, Nick at Night started last year. I did it once a week last year. 2024, you know, RBN, we doing things differently. You know what I mean? So we're gonna do Nick at Night 2 times a week, and then Nick at noon. Is that fine with you guys? Nick at noon on Saturday. And my focus, everyone at RBN have our specialty, right? My focus and my specialty will always be foreign policy, state violence, and class war. So that's what we're gonna do. We talk about a lot of theory, foreign policy, heavy hitting stuff on the show. Also, one-on-one interviews. I have my great friend who is back, OGs of the RBN network. You guys know who she is, Assal Rad. Someone I brought on the International Leftist Coalition. Fantastic anti-imperialist communicator. So on these shows, I will often have a guest, one-on-one style conversations. I have fun doing those, especially with people like Assal, who know so much. But before she get here, we gotta cover the Epstein thing. In the Epstein thing, let's pull up the CNN report. This watching the corporate media cover what we already knew, and I want you guys to understand this. The Epstein documents and what's being revealed right now is stuff that we knew that is now being confirmed. Yeah, we can dive into this. But before we get into this shows the rot of our system. Do you guys know who's not on the Epstein list? Workers. We're the teachers. We're the janitors. We're the construction workers on the Epstein list. You guys notice this? CEOs, politicians, and I said in the video, a lot of people not ready for this conversation about the Mossad in Israel. And you're going to see the corporate media trying to play this as a nothing burger. They say, yeah, this is devastating for the people that's named. It doesn't mean they're guilty. They're going to tell this lie. But they're like, oh, man, it's funny that you guys got this list, but nothing's going to come of it. Well, people don't understand, like, the direct implication in the knowledge that the intelligence agencies, that CIA, that the Mossad uses Epstein and sex trafficking to blackmail politicians, that's a game changer. And this is the rot of society that we've been pointing out, that us Marxists that we've been explaining. There are people who are Western chauvinists who want to believe in the merits of our government. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys enjoy this. People are being unsubscribed from our channel left and right in this historic, like we're blacklisted. You guys, we're like not blacklisted, shadow banned. We're shadow banned on YouTube. But CJ did a report on this. Ever since the start of October 7th, our views have been cut in half. Yeah, I think that's a coincidence. People being unsubscribed left and right. People not getting notifications. CJ has a sub channel subscribed to us that he says himself was unsubscribed multiple times. That's how we know we're doing good work. The fact that that Mediaite ranked RBN as the most far left, crazy, independent news network in the country, that's how I know I'm doing good work. The fact that YouTube's doing this to us, I know we're doing good work. So make sure you check to see if you're subscribed. But my critique of the United States, my politics, people and liberals smugly will say this. Like people say, oh, Nick, your politics is just the U.S. bad. Yeah, my politics is U.S. bad. Once you understand what the United States has done to the global populace. And there needs to be a massive reckoning because we have the ruling class. We have the people with the most power that are the biggest criminals, as a lot of white America and as many people advocate for authoritarianism, cop cities, and giant police state, because you guys think your neighbor is the problem. You guys think the people around you is the problem. The biggest criminals are the criminals in our government. The United States government is a glorified arms dealer ran by a bunch of criminals and sex deviants. And listen to how CNN and many news outlets is trying to report on this very uncomfortable fact. So white America, and this is why a lot of people believe the Hamas rape bullshit. They're telling obvious made-up stories about mass rape that Hamas committed in the middle of a high-tense military operation with Apache helicopters shooting at them, where hundreds of Hamas people was killed, but they want you to believe that they mass rape. Now, this is because people have a racist belief towards Arabs. Whenever we have an enemy, the establishment uses the racist caricatures of our enemy in order to manufacture consent towards war, in order to manufacture consent for their colonialism, for their genocides. So as they spread bullshit that the Gray Zone has done a fantastic job debunking about Hamas being rapists, majority of people believe it, even progressives. I've seen Crystal and many others say that Hamas are mass rapists. Oh, you can't deny they're rapists. I remember on Tim Pool, where Max Blumenthal debated them. They're like, yeah, we don't know they did, but it sounded like something they would do, right? That's what they saw on Tim Pool show. They're like, yeah, of course they would do that. Now, this is a long time established trick of the ruling class, label Arabs rapists. The same way they labeled black men during Jim Crow as violent rapists who was going after white women. The same way they labeled Native Americans as beastly savages who rape white women. This is like, if you study history, what the establishment does is very predictable. It's only people who stay ignorant, they're caught off guard by this stuff. Now, this same Western European white dominated society that labeled black and brown people sexual deviants, because that's the fear of of white people, is the fear of the black and brown sexual deviant. So while you guys was doing that, you want to know who actually was doing the rape? You want to know who was doing the sex trafficking? Our ruling class, the Jeffrey Epsteins, the CEOs, the Bill Clintons, the Alan Dershowitz. As European Western chauvinists smear Muslims, black people, indigenous people, and everyone under the sun, including Russians. Remember, Russians are unique rapists in the Ukraine wars. That they use this psyop all the time. It actually was them. It was actually them who mass raped African Americans, who raped their slaves. It's Israel that's raping the Palestinians. It's the IDF that rapes Muslims. It's the United States soldiers that went to Iraq and then raped Iraqis. And then they are disgusting because white America and European society, which is a society built on violence and rape, they then project that on our communities. They project that on the people who they raped and they killed. Isn't that something? But I don't want to go too long. That's my intro monologue for today. Let's get to the story, because we have Assal that will be joining us later today. I definitely want to try and get to the Epstein stuff before we have Assal on. She does good foreign policy work. But let's cover that. I'm going to show you guys just a little bit outstanding covering it.
Relating to the accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Hundreds of pages were already released. That happened on Wednesday under a December 18th court order. They included deposition transcripts naming several prominent figures, including Prince Andrew and former presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. CNN senior crime and justice correspondent Shimon Prokupez is joining.
Whoa, so there are a lot of misleading things. I didn't catch that the first time. But if you look at the documents, as much I wanted to celebrate Trump being a pedophile, I was ready. I was like, man, if Trump is implicating this, bro, I was going to go ham on MAGA. That would have been so funny. But unfortunately, in the Epstein document, Trump is actually kind of exonerated because they say they didn't see Trump part of the Epstein's cabal. Yeah, he had relationships with them, but they confirmed that he wasn't part of it, which I'm like, man, that's a bummer. And MAGA, they had a massive sigh of relief. You can tell, but let's continue.
Us now. A lot of people were waiting for these names to come out to see who was in his orbit. It doesn't necessarily mean that they did anything illegal, but it does tie them to Jeffrey Epstein, who is a fallen figure by all.
See, this is the only part we need to cover. You guys see what she said. Well, this doesn't necessarily say that they are criminals. She is lying. And I'm going to show you this. She is lying. You want to know who was directly implicated as a pedophile rapist? Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard alumni, the establishment darling, their boy. He was directly implicated to have raped Jane Doe, a minor, multiple times. But despite that, look at how CNN sums up the Epstein document and tell me why we're not the most propagandized country in the world. Now we have the media that is doing cover for the pedophile elite by doing multiple stories. I just grabbed one. They're doing multiple stories like, yeah, these people on the list. It doesn't mean they committed crimes. They are lying to the people right to their face. I'm going to show you guys here very soon.
World prominent figures, including Prince Andrew and former presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. CNN senior crime and justice correspondent Shimon Prokupez is joining us now. A lot of people were waiting for these names to come out to see who was in his orbit. It doesn't necessarily mean that they did anything illegal, but it does tie them to Jeffrey Epstein, who is.
Now, if you was actually a journalist, if your job was to actually cover the news and inform your viewers, you would tell people what people like Alan Dershowitz did. Here's Alan Dershowitz, who is a mainstream establishment scholar. He got Norman Finkelstein blacklisted from academia. Alan Dershowitz is an established rapist pedophile who should never know a moment of peace. This is what Alan Dershowitz did. One such powerful individual that Epstein forced the minor Jane Doe to have sexual relations with was former Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, a close friend of Epstein's and a well-known criminal defense attorney. Epstein required Jane Doe to have sexual relations with Dershowitz on numerous occasions while she was a minor. Not only in Florida, but also in private planes in New York, New Mexico, and U.S. Virgin Islands. Alan Dershowitz is a pedophile rapist in multiple states, in multiple territories. In addition to being a participant in the abuse of Jane Doe and other minors, Dershowitz was an eyewitness to sexual abuse and many other minors by Epstein and several Epstein co-conspirators. So not only did he engage in rape, he seen it, he was part of it, this was his client, did nothing, which made you complicit, which is essentially everyone on the list. And as far as I'm concerned, everyone who knew Epstein, that's the funny part. Every single one of these people, you gotta tell me the ruling class had no idea that was going on. That's what they will have you believe. Of course they did. The same way everyone in Hollywood knew what Harvey Weinstein was doing. Everyone knew what Jeffrey Epstein is doing. You guys tell me that Bill Clinton wrote his plane countless times and no one knew what he was doing? No one knew what was going on? This is the secret of the ruling class. They are criminals. As they implement harsh authoritarian police states on us, they are the criminals. But let's continue, because Dershowitz is an evil motherfucker. He's seen the sexual abuse. Now listen to this. Dershowitz will later play a significant role in negotiating the NPA on Epstein's behalf. Indeed, Dershowitz helped negotiate an agreement that provided immunity from federal prosecution in the Southern District of Florida, not only to Epstein, but any potential co-conspirators of Epstein. Isn't that convenient? Isn't that convenient? So by doing that, Alan Dershowitz, he helped negotiate an agreement with a provision that provided protection for himself against criminal prosecution in Florida for sexually abusing and raping Jane Doe. Meanwhile, this is the person who they have on corporate media as a respectable person. We're not respectable people. They even brought him on Fox News to explain himself. And I actually want to find the larger one. So as I just shared, you guys seen that Alan Dershowitz is a criminal pedophile, and that was revealed in the Epstein documents. Let's pull this up here. I'm gonna show you guys. Let's see if I can find a longer version of this clip. Well, we can do this one because this is Sean Hannity brought on Alan Dershowitz to explain himself, and it was hilarious. I saw this live. Well, not live. I saw it on Fox News like shortly after they posted it. And the second I saw this part, I knew that this shit was going to be all over Twitter. I grabbed the clip and I posted this. So when confronted about his allegations, Alan Dershowitz, you won't believe his response.
The one point I do want to make is that I understand all the feminist groups and the radicals who think this is the worst thing in the world, that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too,
Sir, you are being credibly accused of being a pedophile rapist. And his response, fam, is, do you accuse Hamas? This is how shameless Zionists are. This is how shameless the swamp creatures in our establishment are. Damning evidence of you being a serial pedophile rapist. And his response to him being a pedophile rapist is, what about Hamas, though? With the rape that we cannot prove. You guys know Israeli police say they have a hard time. And this was exposed in Harrods. They can't find evidence of mass rape by Hamas. But despite that, this pedophile is trying to tell you, don't focus on him. Focus on the mythical rapes of the Arabs that we made up. This is beyond parody. Like, this kind of leaves you speechless, doesn't it? How shameless the establishment is. I'll let it continue.
sexual abuse, beheadings. They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know of.
Sir, the average Democrat shit-lib normie is condemning Hamas all the time. Fam, it drives us crazy, doesn't it? I'll show you guys like Crystal, all these progressives that even they have good coverage on Israel. They're like, oh, no, I don't like Hamas. They condemn Hamas all the time. I just did a segment where the Gray Zone exposes The Intercept and The Nation, those fake anti-establishment papers, because The Intercept and The Nation uncritically posted the Hamas rape propaganda. They said it's without dispute that Hamas committed mass rape with no evidence, and the Gray Zone exposed them. That was my last segment I did last week. So despite what Alan Dershowitz said, the liberal feminists are condoning Hamas. They believe that Arabs have the capacity to commit the heinous crimes that they're committing. Hamas, like he said, they cut women's breast off and threw it and played. They said that one of the people said that they played with a woman's breast, like they was tossing it around. And remember, this is the middle of a military operation where hundreds of Hamas soldiers were being killed. Apache helicopters are shooting into the area. It's a Thai military operation, but they said the Hamas was playing with dead women titties, I guess. And liberal feminists are so racist they believed it. So despite that, what Alan Dershowitz said is wrong here. This is pure cope. And this is what a guilty motherfucker sounds like, isn't it?
Hard. And I understand that. To get all these names revealed, and I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred and the murders that occurred. How many have been silent, and how many, like the National Lawyers Guild, have actually approved of what Hamas did? So let's put this in context. Now,
just a serial liar to his core, like every single Zionist, right? This guy was credibly, with way more evidence of any Hamas rape, exposed as someone who raped a minor multiple times and covered up a sex traffic ring. But this white man, because that's what all the Zionists are, they're white people, they're Polish people, cosplaying as Middle East. They then project their rape culture onto Palestinians. It's the most disgusting thing. And you cannot write this stuff. This year is going to be glorious. 2024. Oh, man. It's about to be glorious. So as the Epstein document dropped, and knowledge that we already knew, once again, we already knew that Alan Dershowitz had a relationship with Epstein. You know what I mean? We already know a lot of these people was implemented. We already knew about Bill Gates, his relationship with Epstein. Bill Gates' wife said that his relationship with Epstein is one of the reasons why she left him. We knew about this stuff. The documentaries confirm it, and they want to make people content with what they have been given. There's a lot more, and Epstein just one of many. But despite this, what makes it so glorious, you have Israel, the genocidal state that weaponizes sexual violence. They are now recruiting Alan Dershowitz, as I cover my intro video, to represent Israel in the International Court of Justice on genocide charges. So you would think that Israel would pick someone with great moral standing, but this is actually the best person they could have picked, because there's no better representative for Israel than Alan Dershowitz. If you have anyone who's going to represent Israel, that's exactly what it is. Look at this headline. Does it have to be Alan Dershowitz defending Israel against the charges of genocide? Why must Israel resort to Dershowitz, who demonstratively proved over the years to be in a Dershowitz business, rather than someone who carried genuine international law bona fides? Well, the reason why Israel resorts to Dershowitz, Ben, is because they are the same ilk. Alan Dershowitz is a criminal pedophile. The IDF rapes so much that they can't stop the IDF from raping each other. It's a massive problem. You have around, I'm trying to understand on top of my head. It was something crazy, around like 90% of Palestinians that reported sexual abuse while in Israeli custody. This is something that no one talks about in the corporate media, right? So the IDF rapes so much that they can't stop their soldiers from raping each other, just like the United States military. I see you, Chicago girl. The United States military had the same problem too. There's a big problem with sexual violence in the United States military. But Israel is a pedophile country. We know that Tel Aviv is the pedophile capital of the world. You guys know that? And as CNN is pretending that he claims there's nothing there, the most important thing to take away is the fact that we know that intelligence agencies like the Mossad, they use Jeffrey Epstein as assets in order to blackmail politicians. And remember, look at the date here. This is 2020. This is not new information. We know this now because it's in the documents. So now what they hope to do is to give you a little bit of documents and hope you shut up. No, this is just a start, fam. Remember how the right wing demonized and smeared gay people as groomers? Remember that? Remember how they started a culture war out of nowhere to smear gay people as groomers? Meanwhile, those same right-wingers could support Israel, which is a nation full of pedophiles and groomers. This is something else they won't tell you on MSNBC and CNN. Israel becoming safe haven for pedophiles with laws that allow any Jews to legally return. So what many of these pedophiles do, they get accused of a crime, and after being accused of a crime, they then flee to Israel, who view giving up any Jews to international law as a massive loss to Zionism. So what they do is they protect them. That what led to Tel Aviv being the pedophile capital of the world. Oh, let me see if I can find this, man. Oh, I found it. Jesus Christ, I found it. Oh, there it is. I didn't save it, but look at this. Hey, my friend Assal, I see you in the background. I'm going to introduce my guest here very soon. I'm very blessed to have Assal Rad, my good friend from the International Leftist Coalition, join me on my first show back, season 2 of Nick at Night. So I will introduce you very shortly here, Assal. Look at this map here, fam. The same right wing that attacked and smeared gay people as groomers support the state of Israel. That is, and you thought I was being dramatic. It is quite literally a state full of pedophiles. So Jewish people rape kids. Well, not Jewish people, but Israeli rapists. They rape kids, and in order to flee the laws, they go to Israel. And they just walk around Israel just chilling. Well-respected people in Israeli society. This is Tel Aviv, fam. And how disgusting is it that Israel projected this rape culture onto Palestinians, and people uncritically repeat it because they believe that Arabs are rapists. They won't say it, but that's the only reason why you believe these crazy stories. Meanwhile, this is the reality of the situation. Many accused Jewish pedophiles in the United States flee to Israel. Emmanuel, the town in Israel where pedophiles find safe haven. Israel is a safe haven for pedophiles, and every other week a daycare worker is accused. Oh, Jesus Christ. Look at the one on the right. Every other week a daycare worker is accused of abuse in Israel. But tell me more about how the Palestinians have a rape problem. What happens to sex offenders who flee to Israel? Spoiler, they are greeted with open arms. How Jewish American pedophiles hide from justice in Israel. Now, do you guys see why it's abhorrent that these people projected their rape culture onto the Palestinians? I have a few more short receipts here, and I get our guests in here. Jeffrey Epstein ran sex blackmail operation for intelligence agencies. New evidence suggests. But CNN's like, oh, nothing there. We only have Jeffrey Epstein, who was caught working with the Mossad and blackmailing people. You guys see how we got receipts on RBN? Are they going to tell you this on CNN? Are they going to tell you this on any of the Zionist ejection independent media channels? Last one here. Actually, I got two quick ones here. How Jewish American pedophiles hide from justice in Israel. Receipt for days. And as, once again, I cannot emphasize this enough, as right-wingers was calling our gay brothers and sisters, calling people I know, my brothers like JB, for example, who is gay. I know many queer people in my life. They got no interest in children. That's why I knew it was bullshit on face value. But they smear gay people as groomers, as they support Israeli pedophiles. A society where it is systemic. Every society got pedophiles. We're not ridiculous, right? But it's systemic in Israel. And they have a society, they have it set up in place where it is encouraged for pedophiles to seek the state of return to be safe in Israel. But with that, I think I made my point. Let's get our guest in here. I want to introduce a good friend. Let me fix this here. My good friend Assal Rad. Let's get her in here. So she has a PhD in Middle Eastern history, fellow at Institute for Global Affairs. Also a good friend. You guys seen her. It's been quite a while. It's good to have you back on, Assal Rad. Thank you for joining us on RBN once again, my friend.
Hi, Nick. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much going on. And I want to thank you for, I don't know if you know, you're the first guest of the new season, Nick and I. We had a hiatus for a while. So I had to call some heavy hitters because there's so much going on, especially with you. And I want to get your general take. I want to show you guys this. Let me get everything pulled together. You had the West that claimed that Israel's goal was to take out Hamas. And when you look at the amount of civilian casualties, and when you look at their failure to take out Hamas, when you look at the results, let alone what they actually said, I personally said that from the very beginning of this conflict, that no one can actually make the argument that they are at war with Hamas. So to get things started, because there's a lot to cover here, I want to get through as much as I can. I want to get your general thoughts on what's going on and also your reaction to this. Because Israel is losing. They're losing. Just look at this. White House spokesman, this is John Kirby, who we feature on the channel as a clown all the time. The White House spokesman walks back the original U.S.-backed goal of destroying Hamas. While saying that Hamas capabilities can be degraded, he acknowledged that Hamas ideology will not be eliminated, that it still has significant force posture, and it will not be erased from existence. And this, even using Israeli numbers, the numbers that they have in terms of the ratio between civilian deaths between Hamas, using their fake numbers, is around 95% civilian casualties. So just to get started, I want to get your reaction to this and your reaction to this insane barbaric war, genocide that we've seen Israel commit in Gaza. Just to get started, once again, welcome back to RBN Assal.
Thank you. So, I mean, the idea that Hamas would be destroyed through the campaign that we've seen unfold over the last several months by Israel was, I mean, for any sort of like analyst, it was problematic from the beginning, right? Because, and you don't even have to look at this example. You can look at the entirety of the war on terror, right? Starting from 2001 onwards. And the fact that U.S. militarism, just the idea of militarism being the answer to everything, any conflict, any problem we have, we'll just bomb it away. That logic has been disproven over and over and over again. So this is not a new case in which that would happen. Now, the other thing to keep in mind when we talk about Hamas is, I mean, it's used over and over again as sort of a catch-all excuse for any of Israel's actions. Any action that Israel takes is excused based on the existence of Hamas, the ideology of Hamas, and the attacks of October the 7th. The problem with that narrative is, of course, that things existed before October 7th, and Hamas came into existence in 1987, 1988 during the First Intifada. The occupation of Palestinian territory goes decades before that. So the argument, so Hamas is sort of just used as the scapegoat of any kind of accountability on the part of Israel. And you actually see with something that's sort of fascinating is Israeli officials, official handles of the state of Israel on social media will use that exact excuse over and over again. Anything that happens, well, you should tell Hamas. And it's a really kind of ironic argument that they're using, because if the argument, and I'm talking about the Israeli argument, right? The Israeli and the US argument is Hamas is a terrorist organization. Their actions constitute terrorist actions. They're illegal under, international law, whatever law we want to talk about. Well, if you are the state of Israel and you are saying essentially that, well, if we do it, look at what they're doing, you're essentially admitting to your own crimes, but you're just excusing it, saying, well, if they're going to commit crimes, then we're going to commit crimes too. So it's a very backwards kind of logic that's constantly used over and over again. And it really just ignores the entirety of the history and the roots of why, like the way that violence in the Middle East is talked about is always as if it's inherent to people from that region. It's the problem is Islam, the problem is the Arab mind, the problem is, Persians and Turks and these Orientalist ways of clumping everybody together and just saying, well, violence is natural to them, which is why when there's a war in Ukraine and then the way that it's talked about is, well, this is weird that this is happening in Europe because it's not, it's not Iraq, it's not Afghanistan. And yet you never hear the acknowledgement in this kind of narrative that exists in the West of the violence imposed on these countries, imposed in this region. Why are Iraq and Afghanistan in a state of war? Well, the United States went to war with those countries. The history of colonialism, the history of, they use these phrases like democracy and human rights, and yet democratic movements have been overthrown by the US government historically for decades, many, many decades. And so there's this complete ignorance to the history that got us to where we are. And it's intentional, right? It's intentional because if you don't actually talk about what the roots of the problem are, then you can just keep trying to solve them militarily. And it was an excuse at the beginning to say, well, they have to go after Hamas, even though it was, if Hamas exists as a consequence of the occupation, as a consequence of the oppression of Palestinians, then what logic would tell you that killing them in mass is going to eradicate that ideology, right? I've seen average Americans sort of commenting on how horrifying the images are out of Gaza and how it's radicalized them. Now imagine if that's actually your family, those are your children that you're pulling body parts out of rubble. What does that do to the psyche of anybody? We absolutely understand the idea of Ukrainians defending themselves and resisting Russian occupation, but then don't use the exact same logic to apply it to Palestinians. Never have we applied that logic to Palestinians in the West. And so there's a lot to sort of like unpack about it, but the idea that they would walk back that comment is totally predictable, because what did 20 years of war in Afghanistan do? The longest war in US history, that's what we call it. Oh yeah, we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. So and then if anybody tries to offer a different solution, if anybody tries to say, hey, we've tried this over and over and over again, it has never worked. It has never worked. In fact, we've tended to create more of the problem that we supposedly identify. So in Iraq, you have the US invasion of Iraq, the vacuum that creates, and then the rise of ISIS. So the war on terror actually gave rise to new terror organizations. So this is the backwards logic that feeds, but what does it feed? I mean, who benefits from this? Well, if you're an arms company, you're going to benefit a lot because you profit from war. And as long as there are more wars, as long as these things are prolonged, you profit. If you are Benjamin Netanyahu and you are the Israeli prime minister currently, and you're trying to avoid going to jail, you continuously have wars, and then you benefit from this. Does it benefit Palestinian people? Obviously not. Even though that argument is made, by the way, that argument is made that somehow Israel is saving Palestinians from Hamas. You're not. So this is a legitimate argument that I've heard repeated over and over again. And you have Palestinians coming out and saying, please don't tell us who our occupiers are. Like, please don't conflate the actual, like the central issue, which is the need for our own liberation, the liberation of Palestinian people from an Israeli occupation. So I'm not surprised by the walk back, right? They're going to say that because it's not really an attainable goal in the way that it's being presented. Like, you can go out and just eradicate Hamas. The other thing to keep in mind, by the way, is so they're saying that's the goal, right? That was the intention. The intention is to get rid of Hamas. Well, we've seen Israel carry out surgical strikes just 2 days ago in Lebanon, right? When they're targeting a Hamas leader. So apparently they have the ability to target specific people and not entire residential buildings. And what's now killed 22,000 plus civilians, with thousands, I think estimates of 7,000 to 8,000 buried in the rubble, right? So the reason why there's such a gap in the estimates, why it's around 22,000, and some people are saying, well, actually it's closer to 30,000, is because they're counting those people under the rubble. Because what are the chances that they've survived for this long?
Yeah, well said. This is why I missed our conversations. That's all. It's been too long. There's a lot to break down there. I'm gonna get to the military failure in a second here, but the strategy of Israel is exactly why I personally, I'm not pushing anyone on this, but this is why I personally refuse to condemn Hamas. Because what argument are people using to declare Hamas a terrorist organization? Is the argument that you guys using that they are terrorists because they kill civilians? If you use that argument, it's not going to work well for the West. Israel, the United States, every single president, by that logic, is orders of magnitude worse than Hamas if your standard is only killing civilians. So you know what they say now, Hassan, because they can't bypass it. They make a decide what they say. Well, the difference between Hamas and us is Hamas kills with glee. They happy when they kill people. When we kill people, we sad about it. We drop sad bombs while Hamas is gleeful with how they people. That's legitimately how they try to legitimize how Hamas is evil, and people legitimately fall for it. So this is the position of the West in Israel. The position of the West in Israel, we can bomb as many hospitals, we can kill as many children, we can kill as many journalists, we can kill as many UN workers as we can because we are fighting against Hamas, the evil terrorists. If that's your belief, and people like John Kirby in the White House said that they had no red lines on Israel, if your position that there is no red lines on war, there is nothing that separates you from a terrorist. Because what they claim a terrorist is a fighter who have no red lines. That apparently will make Al-Qaeda, will make Hamas, and all these evil terrorist groups unique, is that they have no red lines. They won't fight for a cause and they have no red lines. So if you as a nation state and you as a populace say, hey, we have no red lines, we can do whatever we want to take out Hamas, you are the terrorist. You guys understand? This is my logic and why I refuse to condemn Hamas. That's my personal opinion. Now, one more thing I want to touch on before I pass it to you for the next part here. I want to cover the military failure. Feel free to chime in on this if you have anything you want to add, because this is another point you was making. Remember how they couldn't take out Hamas? Just like Afghanistan, they replaced the Taliban with the Taliban, and they spend untold billions of dollars to do that, right?
Couple trillion.
Trillions. God damn. Trillion to do that. I think the number was like $300 million a day. My brain don't work in a way where I can calculate that. No, I didn't know it's $300 million a day. It's crazy. They lost. The same way the United States lost in Vietnam. The same way they lost in Korea. Guys, they lost in Korea. They just killed millions of people. People are like, why is the DPRK the way they are? We killed millions of North Koreans. What do you think happen in your society if you just lose 1 million people in genocide? So we lost that war. We just killed people. We lost Vietnam. We just killed people. We lost Iraq. We just killed people. We lost Afghanistan. We just killed people. Israel is getting their ass handed to them by Hamas. There are these stories, and in order to keep my Twitter account running, I prevent myself from replying for them. And you probably shouldn't reply to them either. So there are these stories where these Zionist accounts like, this is Josh. He came to Israel to fight for the Israeli state. He died fighting Hamas. He had a friend. He had friends. He was a basketball player. Isn't it so sad? I was like, fuck Josh. Rest in peace. So every single person that is dying in this campaign, you understand, they are soldiers fighting for a genocide to establish Jewish white supremacy. Would anyone eulogize a Nazi in World War II? Would anyone eulogize any other of our enemies while they're dying? People was celebrating the deaths of Russian soldiers. So the reality is, and then you don't understand this, I know I'm probably scared to tell you. My position is every single one of these motherfuckers who die is a good thing for humanity because they are actively complicit in genocide. But now Israel is a country that is extremely casualty averse, is having a hard time dealing with this because usually with their conflict, they don't like a lot of casualties. Whenever casualties start to climb, even to like 100 or so, they start to pull back. Now look at this headline, and I actually kind of want you to comment on the depravity of it. I think the take is kind of obvious here. The number of wounded Israeli soldiers is mounting, representing a hidden cost of war. The poor Israeli genociders. So, you have any initial take? Do you see this headline? Any reaction?
So there's a lot to unpack. I'll say, first of all, one of the things that's interesting is I think I read a stat that it was about 20% of Israeli soldiers that are being killed are through friendly fire, right? So
oh, Jesus, I didn't know that. Say that again. Say that again.
Israel is, they're killing their own soldiers, right? Just like, I mean, the story of the 3 hostages that had, you know, something white, I don't know if it was a white flag, but tried to basically like inform the Israeli soldiers that they were hostages, tried to speak. I think it was like they tried to communicate with them and they were still killed. Right. So that tells you the idea of how these soldiers are going into Gaza. They are not going in looking for, I mean, they're killing their own soldiers, they're killing their own hostages. So that gives you an idea of how indiscriminately they're killing people, right? How indiscriminately they're killing civilians because they're killing their own. What I would say is, well, in this particular headline, the idea that it's a hidden cost of war is very interesting, right? Like how you would assume that if you're in what you're calling a war, then that is the most basic, obvious cost of a war, right? You're gonna have material costs, and then you're going to have the cost, if not your civilians, your soldiers. Like that seems basic. So the idea that it's a hidden cost sort of is a weird way of framing it. Unless you're not thinking about it as a war, you're assuming your superiority because in fact you have a large military, you have nuclear weapons, you have a navy, you have air force, and the people that you're fighting have none of these things. So that in and of itself tells you the asymmetry between these two sides. And I think that's one of the problems with calling it like a conflict or a war, or describing it in those terms, because it makes it sound like you have, you know, 2 states that are fighting each other, when in reality you have one state that has one of the largest militaries in the world fighting against, or one of the most advanced militaries in the world, I should say, with the backing of the most powerful military in the world, the United States, against people that have none of those things, right? They have none of those advanced technologies. They don't have an organized military. They don't have an air force, a navy. And so I think that is something that's interesting about this particular headline. I mean, look, I will say that you talked about the idea of terrorism. I think the word terrorism has obviously been politicized in a way where, I mean, outside of describing Muslims, I don't think anybody else ever gets described as a terrorist. One of, I think, the differentiating like ideas of how you define it is, and why states aren't considered terrorists is because, well, they're states. We're talking about non-state actors. So people use phrases like state terrorism. But the reality of it is the way that the language is used is to make it seem like, well, we're the good guys because here's the difference. We don't intentionally kill civilians. That's an accident. That's just something that happens in mass by accident. They intentionally kill civilians. Now, one of the things that it doesn't address is that asymmetry that I was talking about. One of the reasons why these types of organizations, terrorist organizations, and I will tell you, I don't agree with this. I do not agree with the targeting of civilians, whether it's a state doing it or whether it's a non-state actor doing it. But one of the reasons behind it is because they don't have the means to have, they can't just rain bombs down on you in the same way. They don't have the same technology to do these precise kinds of attacks that we see Israel carry out when they're assassinating people, not when they're bombing Gaza to absolute destruction. But to your point, and I think this is the important part, is what is intentionality? If you know it's going to happen, how is it not an intention? How is it not I know that I'm going to kill thousands upon thousands I know it, but I'm not doing it on purpose. That doesn't even make sense. That's not a logical statement to make, but we do it over and over again. Well, that's not intentional. It's like, but you know you're doing it. So to say it's not intentional when you know that's the outcome is is logically ludicrous to me to say over and
Yeah.
over again. That's the distinction. They'll say they're doing it intentionally. We're not doing it intentionally. We just happen to kill thousands upon thousands of civilians. What numbers in the millions? We're raining bombs. I mean, if you're the state of Israel, you are raining bombs down on Gaza for 100 days, and you are not intentionally targeting civilians. On top of that, you pointed out the idea that there's the difference between showing glee. There's lots of videos of Israeli
Yes. Yeah.
being, not just Israeli soldiers. I mean, this goes back, unfortunately. There's you can look it up back in 2014 during another massive Israeli military campaign in Gaza. There were Israeli civilians that would set up like chairs to overlook the bombing and eat popcorn and sort of make jokes about it. I mean, in this particular in this campaign that we've seen, I mean, social media is flooded with videos of Israelis making, like, mocking Palestinians for not having access to water, not having access to electricity, not having access to food. The dehumanization of Palestinians is so disturbing to watch because you see people being happy that a civilian population is really suffering in this way. There are Israeli officials of the government who have said, no one is innocent in Gaza. Everybody is guilty in Gaza. That's collective punishment. I mean, they're telling you it's collective punishment. So to say that these are the technical distinctions between these words and these legal definitions that we have really like miss the point. You know, like we're missing the forest for the trees. It's like these are not honest conversations that are being had. And if we're being honest, there's a reason why Israeli soldiers are being friendly fire. There's a reason why Israeli hostages are being killed by Israeli soldiers. There are hostages that have been released that have given testimony of how fearful they were of Israeli bombs because that is what they thought was going to actually kill them. So to say that there's this distinction and one side is moral. I mean, Netanyahu calls the IDF the most moral military in the world. It's one of the most insane statements to make when you have videos of IDF soldiers going into people's homes, which they've displaced civilians from, putting up Israeli flags, using their facilities, going in children's playgrounds and playing with the toys because there are no children there anymore to play with them. I mean, this is cruelty in a way that is really even difficult to watch. But to say that none of this is actually happening, to pretend like it's not happening, is to tell us to ignore our eyes and ears. And I find that honestly just insulting, right? When I hear US officials talking and there are journalists who are actually trying to ask them questions and they evade these questions, the way that they respond makes me feel like they are delusional or they actually just think we're all extremely stupid and can't look at videos and information that's in front of us and just see what's happening. Like we're supposed to watch video after video of a child either maimed or killed and just have no reaction to it, just justify it no matter what happens. And I have never seen anything like this in my life where I have followed events, wars, in this short amount of time to have so many people killed, so many civilians killed, so much destruction. And maybe in part it's also because of just the amount of information that we're getting because of social media, but I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like this. And to justify it is, I don't even know what word to use for it. I don't know what to call it.
Terrorists. They're terrorists and terrorist supporters. Now, so I know how you are. You don't have to be as aggressive as I am. That is just how I am. But we need to use their language against them. Look at how they describe their enemy. Look at how they describe Putin. Look how they describe Hamas. That's how we should talk about our ruling class because that's their mission. When you hear them talk about Putin, when you hear them talk about Hamas, that's how we should feel about them because they're doing the same thing they accuse Hamas and Putin of. And this is the kind of stuff that George Carlin, he was my hero. He mastered it. He explained soft language and euphemisms. And one of the reasons why I'm not accepted in established discourses is why I got a lot of respect for Assal for having a conversation with me, despite the fact that I'm rough behind the edges, around the edges, right? Like you won't see me featured on the Hill like Sabby is, you know what I mean? Because I'm from the Midwest. I am. Let me hold back, but I am not from Washington. You know what I mean? I never in a million years view myself to doing this. I am from the streets. We talk shit. I never imagined you me doing it. I do not have the temperament for this. I can't do soft language. Like look at like George Carlin exposed this very well in the establishment uses soft language, and I also call it civility politics as a way to mute our criticism of the violent empire.
Force. Smug, greedy, well-fed white people have invented a language to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. Or they depopulate the area. The government doesn't lie. It engages in disinformation. The Pentagon actually measures nuclear radiation in something they call sunshine units. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists.
Bro, you don't even realize how much of a goat George Carlin is. Like, I was very well versed in George Carlin. I'm a big fan of comedy. I saw this clip not too long ago. I'm like, he dropped an Israeli truth bomb too? I don't know why I didn't like put this together. I guess I wasn't educated enough. But there it is. And now, fast forward today, I'll pass right to you, Assal. But now, fast forward today, you see Amy Schumer, Jerry Seinfeld. Comedy is a joke now. They're all Zionists. Let me play a part again, and I think you want to chime in, so I'll pass to you after. Listen to this part. This is and this is why I'm rough around the edges. I say stuff that make people uncomfortable, but people can't dispute what I say because I hate civility politics. I hate soft language more than anything. It made my skin crawl. I'm telling you guys, the reason why people in my family is apolitical because they feel the same. I tell you guys the story 1,000 times with my sister. She think what I do is interesting, but she hate politics. But she like the reason I'm not in politics is she know everyone full of shit. In my community, they see these Weasley mouth liberals, all these people using soft language, and that shit does not connect with them. So these people are not political. They see what I do, they fuck with it. They see George Carlin, they fuck with it. So let me play this part again. I think this part was brilliant. This is what he call out the Israeli hypocrisy. And I'll get you in here, so I need one.
Lie and engages in disinformation. The Pentagon actually measures nuclear radiation in something they call sunshine units. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight? Force?
George Carlin had a lot of bits like this, but I was such a Carlin fan. I actually read his book. Like he has an audio book, and even though he has these soft language bit, he actually has a lot written down about this. He has like a whole chapter where he talks about soft language. I highly recommend people talk about it because that bit is actually a very small part. George Carlin, when he does his specials, he takes his writing and he performs his best part. George Carlin famously said he don't consider himself really a comedian. He considers himself a writer who performs his work. That we said many times. So he will take the best part of his writing and then perform it. But I highly recommend check out his book because he has a whole chapter where he gives examples like that. It's brilliant. But anyway, sorry I ran it for a bit. So I want you in, and then we can wrap up here soon. I want to keep these shows for around an hour. I don't want to keep my guests too long. So anything you want to add, and then we can.
Well, I wanted to say the thing about the language. I don't know how to say it. I think people should communicate in every way. I understand the frustration, right? And while I try to maintain like a certain kind of way of communicating about something, the soft language that you're talking about, I certainly do that. I mean, I come from a background where, I come from like an academic background, so I try to communicate things in that way. But I say that, and I understand your frustration. And I think that we also need that kind of communication as well. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the fact that
I never scared off Assal, man. I haven't scared Assal off yet. And just like Sabby, it's not everyone's personality. Like Sabby is just like you as well. Like Sabby is not like me, Roman, CJ that yell, but everyone has their own like communication style. Me personally,
I can yell sometimes. It can definitely happen. It's just that you take that role here, so I don't have to do it. But the idea is that I understand, because I mean, politics, a lot of it is bullshit, right? I mean, you're listening to people actually bullshit you because there are exchanges, and I've done this now multiple times. You know, I like to point out the hypocrisy of U.S. officials. I do this a lot.
Yeah.
And it doesn't
Not
matter
fun.
if they're Democrats or Republicans. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I just care about the inconsistency with which we carry ourselves in the world, because we have, as Americans, we have a special responsibility, right? It's not just a matter of like, we're not just having a conversation because it's interesting to have that conversation. Even though we're experiencing the emergence of a multipolar world where the US is not this like unipolar power, it is still the most powerful country in the world. It just is. It has the economic power still to sanction a country and deprive that and basically sanction that country into poverty. It has the military power to destroy multiple countries. It can do this. And so right now, if you're an American, you have a special responsibility for what is happening in Gaza. You have a special responsibility for what is happening to Palestinians, because it is quite literally our tax money and our weapons that is doing it. And so the frustrating part of the hypocrisy is that it's so blatant. It's so obvious. They don't even care. They don't care. It makes no difference to them if you can point it out over and over and over again. And the argument will be, well, but these aren't the same situations. And they've said that because the Biden admin has gotten so much flack for the fact that they happen to be overseeing two wars, one Russia and Ukraine, and now what is happening in Gaza, and two extremely different reactions to them. They're getting called out for it. And the response from the Biden admin is to say, well, we shouldn't compare those two. Why not? You don't want to compare them because you don't want to admit the fact that we're acting like massive hypocrites. Just today, I put a video where John Kirby is talking. This is in...
Yeah, let's cover that before we leave.
I think it's like March or April of 2022. And he's talking about, so this is within a month of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you had US officials talking about war crimes in Russia. They had no problem saying that Russia was committing war crimes. This is what they said themselves. By April of 2022, Biden used the word genocide. He accused Putin of genocide. This is 2 months into the war. You have nothing remotely close to that in what's going on right now, right? There's no reaction. It's just the reaction is, well, this is war. If Biden officials are asked about war crimes, and they've been asked multiple times by reporters, is Israel committing war crimes? Their response will be either they're not making those assessments at this time. That's a process. It's a legal procedure.
Is this the video song?
That's one of them.
Okay, let me play the video because I haven't seen it yet, and then I want you to react and continue your thoughts as well. I'm actually interested in seeing this. So
that the Russians were committing war crimes. This is of a piece of that, as devastating, disgusting, and sickening as it is. And that's why we're going to participate with the international community on making sure that we can document the evidence of these war crimes so that Russia can be held properly accountable when it's over.
And where does this put Washington and Pretoria?
We find this submission meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever.
What a sick fuck. I'm sorry, but what a sick motherfucker. I told you guys the most
between these two.
Yeah.
So here's the difference. The first thing you'll notice is the language that he's using to describe Russian war crimes, right? Disgusting, sickening. That language is never used to describe what Israel is doing, despite the fact that to any normal person, it is also disgusting and sickening. To hear that 1,000 children have had to amputate a limb, many of which without anesthesia, that is a disgusting fact. They'll never say the same thing. So there's that. That's number one. Number two, you'll notice he said that the US is participating with the international community in gathering evidence, right? When South Africa, when the international community under the UN General Assembly and the Security Council vote for ceasefire, the US vetoes it. When the overwhelming majority of the world says we need a ceasefire now, the US vetoes it. The US makes sure to water down any resolution coming out of the UN. So on one hand, we're participating with the international community, but when we don't want to, we just don't. So the international community is meaningless. International law is meaningless. On one hand, we want to hold Russia accountable, right? He uses that word accountable. And then when South Africa, I mean, he could have, if he wanted to actually engage with the question that the journalist asked him, talk about this 84-page document, engage with the document. What's the problem with the document? What is misleading about it? There are several pages in that document that just records the statements of Israeli officials, things they have said themselves. So, but there's no attempt to explain it. It is dismissed in the most condescending way possible. Like, it is ludicrous to even talk about the idea that what Israel is doing is criminal under international law. So that is the kind of hypocrisy that we see repeatedly over and over again. And I am someone that advocates for the international system. That's my belief, because I think that that is a better alternative to resolving global issues, because we're going to have them, right? We're going to have global conflicts. We're going to have border disputes. We're going to have all sorts of things that we have to figure out how to resolve without bombing people. And that is the only way the US government, for multiple administrations, Republican or Democrat, knows how to resolve issues. And I'm using that word as a joke because they don't resolve anything. They cause more issues, let alone inflicting so much death and destruction on innocent people in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And this is another example. There's a lot of hypocrisy. And if you guys haven't, make sure you guys follow Assal. Constantly putting banger after banger after banger after banger after banger after banger. Here's another one where you call out the hypocrisy. Where remember how they was calling that? They were saying U.S. accuses Russia of weaponizing food in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Israeli officials, I'm gonna say this for a presentation later because we're gonna wrap up here very soon. Where Israeli officials straight up saying that we are weaponizing food. Another public official said we need to ramp that up even more, and we need to ramp up starvation as a weapon so we can get more collaborators. We can get more Palestinians to betray their family and their community with the promise of food. That's a tactic that they use all the time. And one last thing I'll say, what they accuse Russia of genocide, what the ICC accused Russia of, Putin, quote unquote, relocated less children than Israel killed in like a week. You guys understand? So even if you take the accusation at Russia at face value, which I absolutely do not, but if you take the accusation at face value, Israel did what Putin did, but worse, killed them instead of quote unquote kidnapping them. They killed them, and they did that within a week. Once again, hypocrisy, weaponized hypocrisy is the highest form of corruption in our society. That's why these people drive me crazy. And this is something else that you called out. I love that tweet. This is the tweet that we shared a long time ago, where I saw exposes mainstream headlines. There are a lot exposed with the headlines, and that's why it's good to have you show. Make sure you guys follow us all, who pretty much exposes these people. I'm gonna give you the last thought on here. One thing we didn't get a chance to cover, which I'll probably gonna cover on Saturday, because I don't want to rush this segment. I gotta take time with this. Next week is gonna be interesting. Next Thursday is gonna be interesting. You have the genocide charges levied by South Africa on Israel, and you had the OIC that endorsed that. You had Malaysia and Turkey that endorsed it. So that's gonna be interesting. We're gonna cover that next time. We didn't get a chance to get to that today, Assal. But I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm gonna have these short sit downs. So hopefully we can do this every once in a while. Always fun to have you on. We have a good cop bad cop combination going on because people like Assal is extremely important. And I think CJ said this before, because we will say stuff, but we say it in a rough way, and it kind of rough people's feathers. And people are oh, these motherfuckers saying this for likes and clicks, and that's the general animus that we get that I think is classist. I would say something. I would say the same thing Glenn Ford says. I would say the same thing Chris Hedges says. And then people are oh, look at this grifter. Look at this grifter saying Democrats are not the less too evil. Then Glenn Ford says, and they're oh, look, that Glenn Ford's brilliant. Dr. Cornel West will say something about Israel. And they're oh my God, look how brilliant he is. I would say something about Israel. They're oh, he's doing it for click. So there's this natural classism that I always felt in this space. So when we say something, it legitimizes it when we have people like Assal that comes in and say the same thing that we say, but you say it in a very educated way. It legitimizes what we say. I love the work that you do. And hopefully we can have you back on this new show. I love these little short, quick conversations. There's so much to cover. We only scratched the surface of what I plan on covering today, but I love our conversation. So Any last thoughts? Anything else you want to plug, Assal, before we get out of here tonight?
I'm just thank you, for the opportunity to have this conversation, and I hope one of the important things is one of the reasons why that this kind of hypocrisy can be used is because they think people aren't paying attention, right? Like that's why. If people aren't really, and if it's the truth, like if you're not really paying attention, it sort of runs by you because you just hear these terms and you don't question it. And so hopefully more people are questioning these things and more people are calling officials out for the amount of hypocrisy that we're seeing, because we are, as Americans, we are responsible and we are complicit in what is happening to Palestinians right now.
Yep. So here's Assal's profile. This is the stuff I was looking for earlier. I don't know why I couldn't find it, but you guys see how she has great tweets like these all the time. This is the Washington Post headline. The UN says more than 1 out in 4 people in Gaza are starving because of the war. No, Israel is using food as a weapon. So yeah. I love that you do. I love you post stuff like this all the time. So we're gonna have you back on. I'm gonna pop you in the background. Thank you for joining us once again, Assal. But let me get. I think you want to say something. Any last thoughts, Assal, before we?
I just want to say thank you. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night. We definitely will see you again very soon. I see a super chat that came in from Janice. Let me read this real quick before we sign off. Thank you for the 499, Janice. Meanwhile, the only one prosecuted and serving time is a woman, Maxwell. That shit is funny as hell. No. I'm not saying the sexism was funny. I'm talking about the observation because I even seen like even the most like the feminists that make your skin crawl. Even they was like, yeah, that's true. But that comment, she fuck her. You know what I mean? But it is true that out of all the men who was part of the Jeffrey Epstein ring, a woman was the only one that was charged. That is kind of interesting point though. But fuck her. That is not a feminist point we should be making. It's just an interesting observation. So, because what the ruling class will have you believe is that Jeffrey Epstein is the most notorious criminal of all time with no clients, no customers to be known. Like that was CNN just said. CNN said we have all these people just because they're on the list they're not guilty. Get the fuck out of here. But anyway, let's get out of here, guys. I appreciate you guys for watching. This is the first live show 2024. Nick at Night went from one show a week last year. Now we're doing it 3 times. Nick at Night on Tuesday and Thursdays. Nick at Noon. Do you guys like that name? I can't call it Nick at Night on Saturday because it's not nighttime. So on Saturday, it's going to be Nick at Noon, I guess. Nick at Noon on Saturday. So I didn't get to a few things I wanted to cover today, but we will cover that on Saturday. I will cover the genocide charges. This is going to be something that we cover on our channel. And on this show specifically, Nick at Night, it's going to be an ongoing thing because starting Thursday, did genocide trial, it's going to be something else. But anyway, I appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure you guys check me out Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So that's on Saturday. That's next time you guys see me. Have a good one, fam.